In the first episode, we left the 28th Infantry Division right after their initial attacks on the 2nd of November around Hürtgen, Vossenack and Simonskal. The attacks to capture Schmidt and the nearby water dam hadn't gone completely as planned. To the north, the 109th Infantry Regiment was able to capture one of its two objectives, but its 3rd Battalion was bogged down on the Germeter-Hürtgen road. The 112th Infantry Regiment in the centre had the same mixed success. Vossenack was captured with relative ease, but the 1st Battalion, which was supposed to be the main drive on Schmidt, had run into stiff German opposition and was forced to retreat to the main starting line of the 2nd of November. Down south, the 110th Infantry Regiment hadn't made any progress all day, and instead it took heavy casualties. In this episode we will take a look at the actions on the 3rd of November. How did the 28th Infantry Division adapt to still reach its objectives? The initial plan to attack with the 1st Battalion south of Vossenack was abandoned. Instead it was decided to attack from Vossenack itself. The attack would commence at 7 AM in the centre of Vossenack, since no real opposition was met there the day before. From the centre, the 3rd Battalion of the 112th was to attack down to the bridge at the Mestrenger Mühle, leading over the Karl stream. The men of the 3rd Battalion were to capture Kommerscheid, and once the village was safely in their hands, the 1st Battalion would take over the final drive on Schmidt, which was still the primary objective of the day. Leading the 3rd Battalion's advance was K Company under Captain Eugene O'Malley. They were supported by the 3rd Platoon of Sherman tanks of A Company's 707th Tank Battalion. Slightly further back on their left would be L Company with the 2nd Tank Platoon. I Company was to follow up behind L Company. They would on their turn be followed by the 1st Tank Platoon. 1st Battalion's A Company acted as the mobile reserve. In order to protect the flank, 11 men called the Green Hornets under 1st Lieutenant Jack Green were to reconnoitre to the north of Vossenack. The weather of the 3rd of November was similar to that of the days before, and it was typical to the Hürtgen campaign. The temperatures were just above freezing level, the thick mist hung in the dense woods and open plains, and at any minute there was the chance that it turned into light drizzle. All in all, the weather was far from ideal. To top it all off, the quagmire was horrendous to fight in, let alone getting the supplies through to the forward lines. By 7:30 AM, the infantry and tanks moved forwards towards their starting positions inside Vossenack. Suddenly, a fierce artillery barrage struck the infantry companies, who quickly sought cover in the various houses along the main street. Fortunately for the 112th Infantry Regiment, only one man was wounded. During the reorganization of the attacking companies, the tanks of A Company 707th Tank Battalion, under the command of Captain Bruce Hostrup, pulled ahead in order to spray a possible German strongpoint in the woods to the east of Vossenack. In doing so, the command tank of 2nd Platoon under 2nd Lieutenant John Clark veered off too far east and struck a mine, immobilizing the tank. The rest of the platoon managed to pull back safely. Shortly after, K Company started to clear its positions in Vossenack. There was no artillery covering them, so the attack went on in an eerie silence, which was at times broken by an odd German shell landing in the thick mud. K Company made rapid progress, and by 8:45 AM they had already reached the woods to the east of Vossenack. Meanwhile, off in the distance, firing could be heard coming from the 109th Infantry Regiment in front of Hürtgen. At about 7:30 AM, two company-sized assaults were made on the foxholes of the 1st Battalion. The 3rd Battalion, which was to renew its attacks across the minefield, sent over two of its companies upon hearing the firefight unravelling up north. The attacks on the 1st Battalion's front were repulsed with relative ease, but because the 3rd Battalion sent two companies over, the attack across the minefield had to be postponed, as only K Company was left. The attack northwards on Hürtgen had ground to a halt once again. Back south at Vossenack, K Company descended down into the Karl Valley, where they were met by the German artillery fire, which caused 3 men killed and 1 wounded. Gradually, sniper fire was also starting to harass the advancing infantry. When they reached the Karl stream, the men of K Company came upon a party of 10 Germans. A quick firefight broke out, in which 1 German was killed while the other 9 surrendered. Apart from a few odd stragglers, virtually no other opposition was met. By 9 AM, the men of K Company started to cross the Karl stream by wading through its ice-cold water just south of the Mestrenger Mühle, a mill in the forest. Gradually, the men of K Company climbed the steep slopes leading towards Kommerscheid, and soon they reached the edge of the woods overlooking the village. Kommerscheid in the meantime was under fire from the Sherman tanks at Vossenack, providing supporting fire for the advancing infantry. A small firefight ensued between the handful of defenders and the American attackers, but the defense quickly faltered. Upon seeing the men of K Company advance across the open fields, the Sherman tanks ceased their fire. By 1 p.m, K Company had successfully captured Kommerscheid against practically no opposition. With the capture of Kommerscheid, the main objective of Schmidt was well within reach. Standing between their main objective and the Americans were only a handful of pillboxes. Captain O'Malley quickly tried to reorganize his men, but it was made extra difficult due to a brisk German artillery barrage. As soon as the barrage lifted and the company was reorganized, the men under O'Malley moved forwards towards Schmidt. The few pillboxes were quickly overcome and K Company had quickly reached the village without any real opposition. Upon entering the village, O'Malley quickly split his company in two. One group would clear the centre while the other would head straight for the Schmidt-Strauch road to the southwest. The attack on Kommerscheid and Schmidt had apparently come as a surprise to the Germans. About a battalion of the 275th Infantry Division had been tasked with the defence of both villages, but most of them had retreated or were captured. By 2:30 p.m, Schmidt was captured and the town fell in American hands. The 28th Infantry Division had reached its primary objectives with only minor casualties. L Company under the command of Captain Jack Walker had carefully moved behind K Company's advance. At 3 p.m, L Company received the message that Schmidt had been captured and that they were ordered up to strengthen the lines. I Company in reserve had also moved up to Schmidt by 4 p.m. The three companies of the 3rd Battalion started to set up their defences and they dug in for the night. M Company of Captain Guy Pearcey also moved up towards Schmidt in order to bolster the forward lines even more. With the success at Kommerscheid and the rapid advance on Schmidt, 1st Battalion under Major Hazlitt was transferred from the Richelskal area towards Vossenack, from where they were to move up on Schmidt as well. The shaken B Company stayed at Richelskal to protect the right flank of Vossenack and Germeter. The rest of the 1st Battalion, however, was soon around the Karl stream in the valley, and they started to dig in. But later in the day orders were given to Major Hazlitt to continue the advance, and soon C Company crested the ridge overlooking Kommerscheid. They decided to dig in around the edge of the woods. Company A and the rest of the battalion advanced through to occupy Kommerscheid itself. At 4:15 p.m, the Chief of Staff of the 28th Infantry Division sent a message to Colonel Peterson of the 112th Infantry Regiment that his 1st Battalion was to move up on Schmidt as well. But the 1st Battalion decided otherwise and they remained in Kommerscheid, probably because the 3rd Battalion was already in Schmidt and they didn't want to overcrowd the place. As darkness fell, Colonel Peterson's regiment had 1 battalion at Vossenack, 1 at Kommerscheid, and the last battalion was on top of the main objective, Schmidt. The regiment settled down, prepared the defences and nervously awaited what the next day would bring. A Company at Kommerscheid deployed its 1st platoon on the eastern part of the village, while the 2nd platoon was deployed on the southern end. The 3rd platoon was sent to the southwest. Major Hazlitt and the rest of his battalion's staff occupied a small dugout on the northern side of the hamlet. The defences around Schmidt were also quickly set up. L Company took up the defences on the eastern part of the village. The 3rd platoon was put on the right, the 2nd in the centre, and the 1st platoon was put on the left. K Company of Captain O'Malley, which had acted in a superb manner during the day, was positioned on the southern end of the village. I Company was put on the north and west, its 2nd platoon was put up north while the 3rd platoon was put west, completing a full circle around Schmidt. While the 3rd Battalion was advancing on the main objective and while the 1st Battalion also moved up along the Karl Trail, 2nd Battalion remained in their trenches on the forward slopes of the Vossenack Hill. The 3rd of November went rather uneventful, but for the infantry in the forward trenches it quickly became apparent that moving amongst the various rifle slits and trenches was nearly impossible during the daytime hours. Every time someone tried to change its position, he was met by a hail of fire coming from the Germans inside the woods and across the valley. As the day gradually turned into night, the Schmidt defenders were nearly continuously harassed by sniper fire. The most important victim of the German sniper fire was Captain O'Malley, the commander of K Company who had led his men so well during the day. He was hit in the stomach and had to be taken away. The chaotic nature of the fighting in the Hürtgen forest was also very much present at Schmidt. During the night, various German parties wandered in the American defences. A great number of prisoners were actually taken because of it. The 3rd Battalion's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Albert Flood, was concerned about possible German armoured assaults on his position, since he had nothing to protect himself and his infantry from tanks. He called for tank destroyers or even regular anti-tank guns, but since it was dark it was deemed impossible to send them through the treacherous Karl Trail. Instead, a few Weasel supply vehicles brought up some 60 anti-tank mines. The mines were placed on the 3 roads leading into the village. Next to the few mines, only a handful of bazookas could protect the American infantry from a possible tank assault. It was stressful hours for the Americans in Schmidt, carefully awaiting what the Germans would throw at them. One of the major problems facing the Americans wasn't the Germans, nor was it the weather. For their assault on Schmidt, the only possible resupply route was the Karl Trail. This narrow path leading from Vossenack to Kommerscheid was hardly practical to let jeeps through, let alone tanks. The 20th Engineer Combat Battalion was put to work on the trail while the 3rd and 1st Battalions moved up on their objectives. B Company under Captain Edwin Lutz was charged with opening and maintaining the one-way path from Vossenack to Kommerscheid. A Company of the Engineers was tasked with the bridging of the Karl stream down at the Mestrenger Mühle. An attempt was made by Captain Bruce Hostrup of A Company 707th Tank Battalion to move through the Karl Trail after he had received the green light from the engineers. But upon entering the woods via means of the trail, one of Hostrup's tanks nearly slid off the path, as the path was giving way under the weight of the 30-ton Sherman tank. In order not to plunge down the bank, it was decided to abandon the attempt. A new attempt was to be made by First Light. While the 112th had fought its way up towards Schmidt, the 110th had also attempted to renew its attacks on Simonskal. The 3rd Battalion made 2 attacks towards the southeast, while the 2nd Battalion advanced on the Raffersbrand pillboxes. Once again, both battalions suffered terrible losses while nothing was gained. The 1st Battalion, which had been in reserve the day before, was put forward and was tasked with the defence of the Richelskau-Raffersbrand road. Orders came in at the 110th Infantry Regiment headquarters from General Coder, stating that the 1st Battalion was to move towards Vossenack the first thing next morning to attack southwards towards Simonskal. That way, pressure could be lifted off the men opposite Raffersbrand, as the 1st Battalion would be in a position to envelop the German defenders. But by committing the 1st Battalion of the 110th Infantry Regiment, General Coder also committed his last infantry reserve. In order to cover the gap which would occur in the 110th Infantry Regiment's position, Task Force Lacey under 1st Lieutenant Virgil Lacey was formed. The 60-men strong task force would plug the gap which the 1st Battalion was covering. With the American thrust on Schmidt, all German units in the area were put on high alert, especially the elements of the 89th Infantry Division, which had begun to move out of the line since it was being relieved by members of the 272nd Infantry Division. The 1055th Regiment of the 89th Infantry Division at Harscheid received new orders since they were the nearest German elements at Schmidt. The 3rd Battalion immediately dug defensive positions around the Harscheid-Schmidt road. The regiment's 2nd Battalion only arrived late at night and they covered the Schmidt-Strauch road to the west. Further to the northwest, the elements of the 60th Panzer Grenadier Regiment of the 116th Panzer Division had arrived at Hürtgen. They were to attack at first light the next morning. The panzers of the 116th Panzer Division's 16th Panzer Regiment were sent towards Schmidt, where they would provide cover for the men of the 1055th Regiment, which were to counterattack the Americans in the village. All in all, it had been a tough day for the 28th Infantry Division. The 112th Infantry Regiment of Colonel Peterson encountered success, while the others frankly didn't. Peterson had one battalion on the division's final objective, while another battalion was just behind it. There were, however, no proper anti-tank defences, and the supporting Sherman tanks had been unable to clear their way through the slimy and treacherous Karl Trail. Furthermore, the Germans were starting to show up in strength by sending 2 battalions supported by a dozen tanks to the threatened zone. Up north, the 109th Regiment may have beaten off 2 German assaults. The main business of crossing the minefield had been postponed. At Simonskal, the 110th had attempted to move out once more, but yet again the attack was in vain, thinning out the depleted battalions even more. In the next episode, we will take a closer look at the German counterattacks on Schmidt and Hürtgen, and the American reaction to the new threat imposed by the German armour. Stay tuned, don't forget to like and subscribe, and do leave a comment down below. Cheers!